Happy Wisdom Wednesday, everyone, and this week's book of the week is Win Bigly, Persuasion in a World Where Facts Don't Matter by Scott Adams. Yes, the best-selling author of Dilbert, but also a trained hypnotist and a student of psychology and persuasion. Now, I know what you're thinking. I did do this book in the past. We look at Win Bigly, which was one of the books that first got me introduced to Scott Adams. But since it's election season, it's a good time to bring this book out, and if you don't have it already, this really will be your stadium guide to the sporting events that you're going to see in the world of politics and debates, and of course protests. Now, even if you're not into politics, which is fine, buy this book as a business professional because you'll start to learn really how people work, how humans think, and what it means to persuade. Because yes, we do actually live in a world where facts don't matter, and let me give you a perfect example of that. There's a lot of data and case studies and examples where we all can agree that masks actually work. But does everybody wear masks? No. And this is one of many examples that explains how important persuasion is. And one of the things that Scott points out in this book is a persuasion list, or essentially a ranking of all the broad categories of persuasion. Now, aside from the humor, the reason why this book is so great is because it documents how Scott Adams essentially predicted the presidential election correctly almost 2 years in advance back in 2016. Now, for those who don't know, just to state it very clearly, Scott states himself that he feels that he is left of Bernie, so he's actually very liberal. But he is a student of persuasion and psychology and calls it as it is. Now, if you're a sports fan like me, I know we're all bummed because there's not going to be a whole lot of football this fall, but since it's election season, I do recommend watching his daily morning coffee with Scott Adams on Periscope and also YouTube, because what he pretty much does is call politics and popular culture very much like a sporting event. He literally breaks it down to the persuasion level and explains how these strategies and tactics work. So let's get into the persuasion side. Now, there are many different forms of persuasions, but not all forms of persuasion were created equally, which is why Scott Adams came up with the stack of persuasion, or this persuasion list. As you can see right there, there is the persuasion stack with a lot of notes, may I add. Now, Scott ranked these things from strongest to weakest, and of course this isn't a scientific list. It's based on his own personal research, but again, for me as another student of persuasion and psychology, it's very hard for me to find actually a better list than this. It's very, very good. And talking about the list, let me pull that up real quick. Look at that. Power of the internet. The ones that you see closer to the top are actually the ones that deal with emotions, while the ones that go closer to the bottom deal with logic and rationality, which if you realize it, when you start to study it, people are not persuaded by facts and logic. I know it's hard to believe in the stomach, but a lot of times, if not always, it's emotionally based. And what is emotion? If we think about it, emotion is energy in motion. So before you even realize it, we've made our decision about a lot of things, but we use facts and logic and rationality to reverse engineer and reason our way back to those emotional decisions. Now, I know that's hard to believe, but the sooner you start to understand that that's how the world works, you'll be able to watch and observe and understand the world much easier, and more importantly, engage in it in a way that's going to be more effective for you. So let's start with the biggest piece of persuasion, the number one, which is fear, both big and small. Now, again, just like your persuasion stack, fear is deeply persuasive, but not all fear is created equally. And so Scott put together this guide of essentially what strong fear versus not so strong fear looks like. And here's the guideline for that. And if you think about these pieces, think about it how they're applied to both the Democratic and Republican Party as they're trying to persuade you to vote for their candidate. A big fear is a lot more persuasive than a small fear. A personal fear is a lot more persuasive than a static, non-personal fear that's a sort of a generic national problem. A fear that you think about most often is a lot more powerful than a fear that you don't really think about at all. A fear you experienced firsthand, for example, crime, protests, inequality, is a lot more stronger than something that you've never experienced yourself. And a fear with a visual component is a lot scarier than one without. And this is one thing I do want to point out, and again, it's mentioned in a variety of these books, whether it's marketing or psychology. One of the most powerful words that a marketer, salesperson, politician, anybody could use is the word imagine, right? And to illustrate this point, let's watch this very short clip from one of my favorite shows, Rick and Morty.
So, why can you talk?
What is this?
I need you in one spot for a clean mind scan.
Mind scan? Look, you're overthinking it. The point of a talking cat is to have fun.
Find the insinuation that I can't ask questions and have fun condescending. You find it condescending, Jerry?
Yes.
All right, I'm from outer space. Happy?
No.
Exactly, because no answer would be satisfying.
Because it's a lie. Let's see the truth. What in the... Oh, son of a bitch! Jerry, don't!
I want to see.
No, you do not!
No. At least now, maybe
Get the
I'll...
hell out of here!
But I got nowhere to
Get
go.
out! Get out!
He was in my home, where I keep photos of my parents!
Jerry, I have a device. It can make us forget.
No, I don't think we should forget.
So, as you can see there, the creators of Rick and Morty decided to show this talking cat and it has some very strange past. And when Rick and Jerry realize and see what that past is, we're all immediately thinking what it could be. But because they don't reveal what that terrible thing is that they're reacting to, our imagination is put to work for every single individual viewer to use and imagine the worst thing possible. So when there's a lot of visuals to use for this election, right, first-hand experience, and each party is getting you to try and imagine a world where they are running the country and when their other parties running the country.
Imagine a country where affordable health care is a right, not a privilege. Imagine a world where America leads on climate change. Imagine a president who stands up to the NRA and gets assault weapons out of our schools. What we imagine today.
Imagine the country you want to live in, one with true equal opportunity, where hard work pays off and justice is served with compassion and without partiality. You can have it. Imagine a world where the evils of communism and radical Islamic terrorism are not given a chance to spread.
It's a very powerful form of persuasion, right? And if you pay close attention, you'll also notice the things that scare you the most, which is why there's that famous quote, if you learn what your enemy uses to scare you, you learn very clearly what scares your enemy. Now, the second one is identity. Now, why is identity such a powerful one? Well, the reason why is that we're all human beings, we're all animals, right? We have this thing within us, right? And it's an evolutionary thing where we want to be in a tribe, right? And it's based on evolution, right? We want to be with people who are like us, same background, same culture, they look like us, they talk like us, because, again, not civilized human beings today, but consciously, because that old brain in your head hasn't changed much in the last 1,000 years. Realize that anything that's different is a threat to your life or threat to resources, right? And of course, in civilized society, we go through ways to get over those kind of biases, but those are still there. And so when you use identity to talk to someone, persuade and say what they identify with, and more importantly, what are they aspiring to? Right? It's a very strong piece of persuasion. And if you look at some of the great books in history when it comes to mass movements of psychology, such as Eric Hoffer's True Believer, the biggest part about mass psychology and mass movements is having each individual tie their personal identity to that of the movement, right? And so that's why a movement, a crowd of people, takes on its own psychology. And it's been often noted that you can take very, very high IQ, intellectual, well-educated people and put them all in a group. Their intellectual level will lower because the mass psychology of that group takes over. And at that point, that's really its own animal. So that's the book of the week. Great lesson of the week. I hope you get the book. It's definitely your ringside guide to this fall's election and really every election moving forward. And probably the most important thing is if you actually want to run for office, you should get this book. And if you're trying to be more effective as a business person, you should also get this book. I always thought Scott Adams was a fantastic writer. He really influenced my life in terms of how I can be better as a writer and as a marketer and overall as someone who's persuasive. So that said, happy Wisdom Wednesday. Go out and get the book. Be safe, and I'll see you next week.